space is a place for us.
Real people with real issues.
Discussing real topics.
Black space.
A safe space for our community.
And Anthony says this, it's something related to that. Does code switching equal making others around us comfortable in their environment? If so, we code switch with Blacks and others and not just white people. Agree?
What he said,
kind of like what you're saying, Otis, with the levels of education and being able to switch to accommodate your audience.
Yeah. But is he saying in comparison to with, like, we do that not only just with Black people, but with like our Asian friends or Hispanics or whatever?
Absolutely.
You know,
I mean, I'm guessing that's what he's saying by others.
I can't really relate because I don't really have friends outside of Black people, honestly.
Really?
Everyone, like everyone that I know, like, you know, I mean, I don't consider like my coworkers friends, you know, but I do interact with, you know, people that are not Black. But as far as hanging out with and like calling, I don't have any non-Black friends, so I can't.
Right.
You either? Am I the only?
I don't, and it, yeah, I don't. Now, when I was in high school, you know, I was part of in the DC area. I was part of the integration, the busing. So yeah, probably in high school, what we define as a friend, then I would say I had friends that were white and Asian. But now as an adult, all of the people that I consider friends are all Black. I don't have any white friends. Now I have people that are, I know people that are white that I've worked with that I still interact with on Facebook, or we might talk on the phone every now and then. But yeah, I don't, and even with them, I keep it, I'm just like this with them. I can think of two people, Molly and Danny. And the way that I'm relating to you two right now is exactly how I relate to them. Nothing changes.
So it is just me here that has other friends.
Well, I'll say this. So the white guy at my job, Charles, like that was the one who I was trying to educate about, you know, Blackness, like telling him to watch certain movies. But no, I was the same Otis. Like, you know, if I had to get somebody together, he saw that. If I, you know, was being really sweet to someone, he saw like all sides of me pretty much. So, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like, you know what? I think that this would have been a little more effective if you had someone that was a little younger on the panel, because, you know, myself, you, Rob, we're all like comfortable.
We don't care. We kind of.
Like if you had like a 21-year-old who's just entering the workforce, it would be very interesting to get their perspective, because that would be interesting to hear like about code switching right now, especially in this climate. And none of us really can attest to that because we're set in our ways and we're confident in who we are as adults. So,
right. But if you think about it, the millennials seem to be a lot more confident in their 20s than we were in our 20s, because it's a lot more acceptable now to be the way that you are. I mean, you see a lot more women with their natural hair. You see a lot more men carrying on the way that you are. It was like back when we were growing up and we first entered the workforce, it was frowned upon for us to do those things because we needed to conform. So the conversation might still be similar to what it is that we're saying right now, if not more confident than us, because they didn't spend the time trying to develop the demeanors that we have right now. They went into it being the way that they are.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah. I know that I have multiple other friends though. Like whether, and it's, I mean,
work?
Huh?
How does that work then when you're with them? Like,
I honestly just act the same way, truth be told. But a lot of people say that I have just a very, well, I'm trying to find the word, universal demeanor per se. Sometimes I get offended because I'm like, well, what are you trying to say? I'm not Black, I'm not this, I'm not that. But I learned to accept that maybe it is just universal because of my background in the different places, you know, people that I've dealt with and where I've lived in my parents and everything else. So, but yeah, they get Parul no matter who they are. Like my white friends get the same as my Indian friends and my Asian friends, my Black friends, and whatever in between.
Do you feel amongst your others friends, are they all a certain like socioeconomic status, or do you have some that are like well off, some that are not, like middle class?
A range.
There's a range, because you find them code switching amongst each other since you can't relate to that? Do you see any
Sometimes they code switch to try to conform to me what they think. And it falls back into what you were talking about, educating. But on your end, he was kind of just being like, okay, I don't know what it is I'm doing here. Whereas these people, they're kind of like, oh, well, I think this is what Parul is gonna like. I think this is what they do in Miami. I think this was hey, do you want such and such? And it's weird, but and I out of the people that I interacted with for a while, it kind of split in two. Like I have my little, like, let's say I have like 10 white friends, right? And probably 3 of them will kind of be like, okay, well, I'm going to try to be what I think that Black people are. And I eliminated them really quickly. I'm like, because what you're not going to do is put me in a bubble or make it seem as if I have to behave a certain way just because of your lack of education. And then there were the people, the other 3 that would ask me, be like, okay, well, I'm not very familiar. Can you explain to me what it is? Like, well, how this and that. And those people I actually will have a conversation with, because those you can tell that they're genuinely like, oh my gosh. And then there are other ones are kind of like, well, this is not what I expected her to be. So I wanted this. I don't want to have any parts of it. I'm like, all right, well, did you want to have a token ghetto friend or something like that? Because if that's the case, you can keep it moving. So I do have those varied experiences depending on the groupings of people. It is very interesting to watch. It's an amazing social experiment for me, truth be told.
Yeah, I had a friend that a young lady that I thought we were going to be friends, but I think because I was unwilling to code switch, eventually, I think initially, because she's a liberal, I think initially she thought that she could handle it. We could, but I think over a period of time, I just became too much for her. It's just like, because I just kept keeping it real. Like, if I'm talking about the system, I'm talking about white this or white that or Black this, I'm talking about it to her just like I would talk about it with my man Mac. It was no different. And I think after a while, it became probably overwhelming for her. So she kind of weeded herself out of my life.
So let me ask you guys a question. I just thought about this. I had an incident where around the elections last year, there was a lady that was within our circle of friends. And I don't know if she felt the need to try to impress me. So I was the only Black woman that was in the space. And there was a commercial that came on and she started talking, I guess, whatever the politician was saying, it was obvious that they were speaking negatively about African-American people. And she was getting offended. Like, she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that, like trying to overcompensate. And then she turned to me and she was like, oh my, why am I so mad? I feel like I'm more Black than you. Have you ever experienced someone that tried to overcode switch in the other direction and to not only gain acceptance or just to get some sort of validation that they're worthy of being one of us? Otis.
So yeah, I experienced that a lot in college, actually. So as I mentioned, I went to a private white institution, Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia. About 700 students at the time that I attended. It was about 15 to 18% Black. They tried to say 20%, but that wasn't accurate. And I noticed that, so there was a lot of like regional, so like a lot of white girls were from Michigan and they would try to say they were from Detroit. And I'm like, oh, I'm from Detroit too. So where are you from in Detroit? And I'm like, this white girl's not from Detroit, but I'll allow it. So I'm like, where are you from? So, if you're at least from like the surrounding suburbs, I'll give you a pass. But this chick was like, she's from Novi. I was like, girl, that is not in Detroit. And then she started trying to talk slang and it was just a disaster. She started trying to name streets. She was like, well, my friend, a friend of a friend, like knows Eminem, because she lived off of 8 Mile. It's like ridiculous, right? Just crazy. Okay. So I would just say that a lot of that was like girls trying to relate for me because they claimed to be from the same region that I was from. Mm-hmm. Also, I was very standoffish towards white people in college because up until that point, Detroit is a kind of a segregated place. So although I went to school with white people, it was like the white people that I went to school with were similar to me as far as like same social economic status. So it wasn't like they had this power distance between us. When I got to Agnes Scott College, those chicks were rich. Woo, that was almost disastrous. Those chicks were rich, right? So they're looking down at you like, you little peasant, poor Black girl, what are you doing here? You know, like this young lady, speaking of code switch, and I'll use her as a perfect example so I can, you know, transition on to something else. This young lady came up to me, and it was like our first day of orientation, and she was like, oh, you know, what are you doing here? And I was just like, what? You know, it's like, what do you mean, what am I doing here? I was like, what are you doing here? You know, so like, I'm like, okay, I already knew I was gonna have to check her. So she was like, well, I mean, did you get into Agnes Scott because of affirmative action?
Oh my gosh.
Yes, she was so racist, but she was just so ignorant. I'm like, girl, I was like, girl, where I'm from, you would get punched in your face for saying something like that. I was like, no, I'm not here for affirmative action. I was like, well, let me ask you something. What was your class rank? And she was like, oh, 20 something. I was like, I was number 3 in my high school class. I was like, what was your GPA? And then she said it, and I was like, yeah, well, my GPA was a 4.8 out of a 5.0 weighted scale. I said, but it sounds like you are here because of affirmative action, not me. And then I walked off. So later on throughout our college experience, there was this lesbian young lady that was a Black girl. She started dating her, and she thought that, you know, she was cool now because she's
a lesbian.
Because she's dating a Black lesbian. And I had to check her again because she tried to, you know, use slang and, you know, hey, Otis, you know, what happened with us freshman year, you know, well, but I'm cool now because I'm with Kendra. And I'm like, actually, you're not. So I would say that a lot of my experiences were there outside of Agnes Scott. I really haven't had much interaction with white women outside of being in court. And I haven't had to really do anything to make them feel comfortable.
Okay. How about you, Rock?
Yeah, no, I don't.
I should know better than to ask you. Like,
I can't. I don't know. Right? You know, you can.
That's unacceptable. Like, and you know, I can think of maybe one person that might have been headed in that direction, but you know, it's like, you know, I'm gonna check it like right away. Like, you know, and it's not gonna be funny. It's not gonna be mean, but it's gonna be very direct. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be very serious, and I'm not, and then I'm going to shut it down. Like, that's it. That's all. Don't get that comfortable around me again ever in your life, Slim.
Right.
Ever. Don't get that comfortable. You don't know me like that, and you're not going to know me like that, and I don't want to know you like that. Take that shit somewhere else. Period. The end. Yeah, I'm not going for all of that.
And we shouldn't have to deal with any of that. I mean, we're talking about how some people, you know, have little momentary lapses and they do code switch, or they feel like it's necessary to be depending on certain things. But in no way, shape, or form should we be able to accept a level of disrespect where they feel because we haven't opted to switch that they can speak to us a certain way, or think that they can become down with one of us just because it makes them look good.
Right.
I don't want them to try to use, they shouldn't try to use us as puppets and pawns to make them look like they're more socially conscious or aware.
Right.
And that's part of the 10 ladies that I was talking about. Those 3 that we had to eliminate pretty quickly, because you can tell that they wanted to just say that I have a Black friend. I want that pat on my back. When I have these social conscious awareness types things, I'm going to take a picture so I can smile with this person, so they can be like, oh, look at my one Black, like Trump, look at my Black person, look at my African American.
Right.
We don't need to be that African American.
Right.
So we say all this lovely stuff. We don't feel it's necessary. We don't feel we should have to code switch, but some people, in some instances, it's a necessary evil. They do it for whatever their reasons are. To transition out of that, what do you think that we should do as a community to get us out of those situations where we have to code switch? Like, Otis, how do you think it would be beneficial? Like, we need to have more inclusive meaning including ourselves in different environments so we can be open to do what we do best.
Absolutely. I mean, as a community, I mean, we're behind. I mean, what is this, 2019, and we just started voting 50 years ago. So we are significantly behind as far as a community and as far as comparison and contrasting to the status quo, right? But as far as what can we do, even though we're behind, there are still measures and things that we can do. So what can we do? We can be like the Tyler Perrys of the world. If they're not going to have at the table for you, you build your own table.
Exactly.
Get everybody there that you want to be there. But I mean, yeah, that takes time and it takes energy. The unfortunate thing about Black people, and the unfortunate thing about any kind of topic when we talk about Black community, is even though ancestrally, historically, we are a collectivist community, we are very individualized in America. So it's very hard to come together and kind of have any kind of movement whatsoever, because you have the Negroes that, worship white people versus the Black people that are, conscious and understand how everything works. The educated, I guess you have the educated and versus the uneducated. So it's so many different stratifications within our community that unless and until we can all stop feeling like we are an enemy of one another, so we're gonna have people doing this right over here, people doing this over here, people like feeling like they're not included. But there has to be some kind of common ground, and what we all need to realize, it really is us against them. Like, no matter how much shucking and jive and tap dancing you do for white people, code switching, yes, massing that you do, they're not going to give you anything. Like, it's designed for you to stay at a certain level. So when we can get, I guess, if we can get those hopeless and hapless Black people, that group of people, because if you can get those diehards, if you can at least change their mind frame and have them on board with us, then that's the hardest group in my opinion. The uneducated can educate,
right?
And educated people, they understand. And the people that are super conscious, like, everybody has a framework and everybody has a significant part, but we need to figure out how to get us all on one wavelength. And honestly, I don't know how to do that right now.
Yeah. How about you, Rock? I feel like you have a little bit of insight as to how we can all get together, even if it's on smaller scales.
No doubt. I appreciate that. Well, I want to go back to something OT said earlier about when she disagreed with me on a point. I want to say that I agree with what she said about the Trojan horse situation. But I just want to clarify that what I was saying is, if you are reducing yourself purposely and it's not comfortable for you, and obviously the caveat is, if you're able to, just switch careers. Like, don't keep reducing yourself and feeling uncomfortable in that environment. If you can't wear your hair the way that you want to wear your hair, and you're consciously code switching and consciously doing things to fit in, and it's uncomfortable, then it might be time to reconsider.
Black Space, a safe space for our community.